Hi everyone, I'm Shelley and you're watching There's No Place Like Home. In this week's installment of Question the Narrative, I wanted to discuss with you how they control us. That's really something that a lot of people ask. Since so many of my videos go over an alternative history possibility, one thing that people wonder is how could they possibly have lied to us about so many things and gotten away with it? And ever since I did the video last week on the lunatic asylums, I have started putting together this timeline. And I say this all the time, but this is all speculation on my part. But I've realized that there seems to be, again, some sort of a timeline of how their control of us has evolved throughout what we know to be as history. So I want to start out with a couple of quotes are actually from 1984 by George Orwell. And I want you to think about these quotes as I go through everything that we're going to be talking about today. So this one says, every record has been destroyed or falsified, every book rewritten, every picture has been repainted, every statue and street building has been renamed, every date has been altered. And the process is continuing day by day and minute by minute. History has stopped. Nothing exists except an endless present in which the party is always right. And I'm going to read one more to you. And this is also from 1984. And really, I'm starting to believe that this is not fiction. This is disclosure. I think that books like 1984, Fahrenheit 451, Brave New World, they're telling us something. I'm starting to think that they're telling us either what they have done or what they're planning on doing. So we'll read this one. And if all others accepted the lie which the party imposed, if all records told the same tale, then the lie passed into history and became truth. Who controls the past, ran the party slogan, controls the future. Who controls the present, controls the past. And that's honestly what I think they have been doing all this time. They have been altering things as they go along, and they've been using different methods for it. Now, a lot of people have brought up the possibility that wars are actually created to hide history, to destroy artifacts, to destroy books, to destroy knowledge. And this certainly wouldn't be the first time that we've heard of anything like that happening. I don't know if you've ever heard of the Library of Alexandria, but that was said to be the most complete history in the world. It contained the most artifacts, the most documents in history, and yet it was destroyed. Now, I'll leave the link to this article in the description, like I always do. So right here it says, at its height, the Library of Alexandria housed 400,000 scrolls, which would be an equivalent of 100,000 books. There's a picture of what the Library of Alexandria was said to have looked like. It's very interesting. It seems to have almost a combination of the, I guess you would call that Greco-Roman architecture, along with some what looks to be Egyptian to me. But again, I'm no pro at all of this stuff, but that's not the point of this anyway. I just wanted to go over with you what happened to the Library of Alexandria, because what we have been told throughout history is that it was destroyed. It was destroyed by Caesar and the Romans, and we lost pretty much everything. They were able to get some of it back, but that, yeah, we lost so much history when we lost the Library of Alexandria. Now, this article here tells us that it wasn't destroyed by Caesar and the Romans in the Civil War. It says that he set fire to ships in the nearby harbor, but then the fire spread into the library, and it says most important scrolls were saved. So again, you just don't know if that is that another alteration of history, or is that the truth? And that's really the crossroads that we're at nowadays. We don't know what has actually happened, and it's really up to us to try to piece things together, to investigate on our own, because unfortunately we can't trust those who have been telling us what's been happening. And I can't even say that everyone, all of those professors and historians and everything, I can't say that they are, quote, in on it, because they have likely also accepted the narrative that they've been fed, and unfortunately not a lot of people question that. But here it does tell us that the Library of Alexandria did decline over the centuries. And so we did actually lose a lot from Alexandria, according to this. But again, this is the first I'm ever hearing of this. I wanted to read this to you, though, because I found this to be really interesting. However, its twin sister library at Serapeum, I don't know if I'm saying these things right, survived till 391, when it was demolished on orders from Christian Bishop Theophilus of Alexandria. So there was a library that was demolished on orders from a Christian bishop. And then down here it says books which survived were completely destroyed in 7th century by Muslim rulers of Egypt. And so you have to wonder what was in those books that was so important that they were purposely destroyed. And this is why so many people do go back to the idea that these wars that are fought, this is from the Civil War, was there another purpose that we weren't told? Was the real purpose because they were hiding architecture? They were hiding artifacts, evidence, books? We really don't know. But it's something that I think that we need to stop being complacent about it. So then we see photos like this also. This is also supposedly from the Civil War. And you can see all of the destruction here. Those are all cannonballs. And there are a lot of questions. People want to know how all of this rubble just came from these little cannonballs, because you wouldn't think that they would cause such devastation, but that really is for another day. But you can see just from the destruction, just in the Civil War, and we have how many wars throughout history? It would have been easy to destroy things that they didn't want us to know about. Who remembers the Persian Gulf War, when the National Museum of Iraq was like completely looted and so many things were stolen from there, so many precious artifacts that we may never get back. And again, we're back to this idea that there is lost or hidden history because of that event. So yeah, I think that one element of control has been through wars. Maybe not always as the primary reason for the wars, maybe it was, but I think that sometimes wars could have been a tool to kind of keep people in their place and to only keep them knowing what they wanted people to know. I think that another place that this happened was in these creepy lunatic asylums. This was another way to control the flow of information. If they had people who were speaking up about things, who were telling the truth, and were letting people know that there were things being hidden, a lunatic asylum, if you watched my last video, you would see there are like 125 reasons why you could have landed in a lunatic asylum. And it certainly does seem plausible that this could have been a place where they would house people who weren't willing to go along with their new narrative. And some of the things that were done to these people in these places were horrendous. On top of that, we've even got the reservations, the Native American reservations. Is that another way that they controlled the flow of information? By putting them into their own area, having their education controlled. And unfortunately, the people in the reservations are so downtrodden. There's a high alcoholism rate. There's a high poverty rate. There are so many issues going on with the reservations that that could have destroyed much of the oral history that was being passed from generation to generation. Oral history that was always so important in their culture. So the next step in the timeline of control, I believe, may well have been the World's Fairs, the expositions. The first one was in the 1850s in London, and the World's Fairs were without a doubt used to control the narrative. So this is a photo. It says the Alaska Yukon Pacific Exposition and Seattle, the beautiful exposition city. And this shows some of the activities, so to speak, that were being done at these expositions. And I encourage you, if you haven't watched my video about the re-education that going on at the World's Fairs, watch it, because there were so many narratives being pushed there that really became central in what we even believe to this very day. Let's just go through, these photos always just completely stagger me. And to me, you know, whether you believe in the reset or whether you just believe that these were people new to the Americas that were being fed the education quote that the powers that be wanted them to know, this would have been the ultimate place for them to do it. But I don't really buy that idea very much, though, that it was just for the new settlers, because yeah, the United States was the new world, but these expositions were all over the world. It wasn't just in the United States. I want to read to you a quote from a book that I have actually talked about before. So this is, it just says Exposition Beautiful. Magnificent forestry building, one of the great features of the fair. So in the book, Exposing the Expositions, Ancient Rome in America by Howdy McCoskey, what he says is that what is odd is that every World Expo city prior to 1915 had a giant fire in its recent past. And we've gone over the fire issue too. I've done a video on those as well. And he also says, and this is even more interesting, the Australian World Exposition Project sponsors report in 1966 claimed that, quote, of all the events of recent history, only wars have had a more dramatic influence than world expositions upon the expression of civilization. To me, they're all but admitting that these are ways that they are controlling the narrative. Just look how crisp this is. It's just, I just find these amazing. Just looking at the beautiful buildings, who would not be drawn in by what they see here? I have another quote now from the same book, and let me just open up to it. San Francisco was the last of the great fairs, and it became the marker with World War I for what came historically after. Prior to the First World War, the fairs had an industrial theme based around Greco-Roman buildings. After the war came more modern style exposition buildings and a focus on science and carnival type fun. So before the end of the First World War, so all of the older expositions or world fairs, they were all focused on education. They brought in people from different countries, from different cultures. Don't ask me how they got them to participate. I think that that might be a rather sad story to hear. But this was about education. This was about pushing a prescribed narrative. But what happened was after the First World War, the World's Fairs, they were no longer like this. They went to being more of a carnival type of event. And I kept thinking to myself, why, what would that, could that possibly be linked? World War I and the change in the World's Fairs. And so certainly you could think to yourself, well, maybe World War I, that they had enough evidence destroyed that they were confident that the narrative had been pushed, they had spread it enough. And if you look, I just want to point out that World War I ended in November of 1918. But then something else came to my attention. Do you know what else happened in 1918? In the United States, all states had passed compulsory attendance laws by 1918. So what we have here is that we have a change in the World's Fairs. They went from educating to entertaining. It's almost as if they weren't needed for that anymore. And then what happens is we have a shift. World War I ended in 1918. Compulsory schooling in all states in the United States. And I know that I'm focusing a lot on the United States, but I think that with them calling the United States the New World and with having all of these new settlers, new immigrants here, I almost look at it as it could have been a hub for that point of time in history. And I could be wrong, but I find it very, very convenient that right when they stopped having the educational world fairs, well, they now started making all children go to school, at least for elementary school, by the same year, by 1918. So they had already indoctrinated all of those people, whether it was through hiding history, whether it was through putting the people who were outspoken into these asylums or onto these reservations. It could have been through the World's Fairs, telling people what they wanted them to believe there. And then once that was no longer needed, well, yeah, of course it wasn't needed anymore, because now these kids were going to be going to these state-run schools where, of course, they're going to be fed the narrative. Get them while they're young, right? And what we see, though, is that even the compulsory, or I should say the state-run schools, the government schools, they evolved over time. And they started out mild. I think that they were pushing things mildly, but right now we are at a fever pitch in these government run schools, because these schools really are the main focus of the indoctrination, of pushing the narrative in this day and age. And then that moves on into the universities and the colleges. We can see how successful these universities and colleges are at pushing what the powers that be, or what the deep state, whatever you want to call it, what they want you to believe. So then now we have no need for the World's Fair anymore. We've got the compulsory schools, we've got the universities, and what's next? What about the adults? What about those who are out of school now? What about those who are out of college? Well, now we have the entertainment industry. So not only is the entertainment industry great at pushing something on adults, but children are also completely enamored by these celebrities that they see in the entertainment industry. And the entertainment industry, especially within the last few days, I have noticed, not few days, few years, I have noticed it so much. They don't even try to hide their agenda anymore. So we've got the entertainment industry. That is also a way of controlling us. On top of that, we have the news. Project Mockingbird, CIA control of your news and entertainment. So yeah, if you haven't looked into Project Mockingbird, I encourage you to. I actually did a video on it a couple years ago. I'll leave a link to it in the description box. But yes, the CIA infiltrated the news organizations, and they are there to this day. I saw a quote from 2017 that said that there has been no official end to this project. They're controlling the news. And what we can especially see going on nowadays is that people, well, not all people, a lot of people will believe anything if it's on the news. No matter if it makes sense or not, they will believe it. This entire control timeline has been so effective on the vast majority of people. It's sad, but it's true. And going back to the entertainment industry, I just also forgot to mention that they don't call them TV programs for nothing. They are programming you. This all goes back to when we were talking about language and how a lot of the words that we use, if we actually look at what the words say, there is an alternate meaning that a lot of times we aren't even aware of. And this is one of those elements. TV programs, because they are made for programming the viewers. So now, beyond the entertainment industry and the news, we also have social media. And honestly, I think that social media is probably as effective in indoctrinating people as school is. I even know that even with my own children, they're homeschooled, and I strictly watch the things that they are up to when they are on their phones. They're only allowed on them on the weekend, and they're only allowed to watch certain channels, and they're only allowed to do certain things. And yet I still see things being snuck in, even if it's through ads. This is something that is not only being used to control adults. It is highly being used to control children, especially TikTok. TikTok is the worst. My kids aren't even allowed to have that downloaded on their phones. No TikTok for us. And so the question is, now that we have an idea of how they're controlling us, what are we going to do about it? Unfortunately, we can't do much about most of the other people out there because most of the other people have been completely blinded by everything. And if you would tell them that they're being controlled through these means, they would laugh at you. They would call you a conspiracy theorist, even though I've got to say that we've been proven right over and over again this past year. But they wouldn't believe you. So what we need to do is we need to train up our children to reject this, to reject the control, to research things, and not even just our children, ourselves, to let go of everything that we were taught and look at things with new eyes and weigh them on your own. And remember to take everything with a grain of salt, because in reality, we don't know what's going on. That's all that I have for you today. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed yet and would like to hear more of what I have to say, I would love if you would do that. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave one either here or over on Instagram. And if you like my work and would like to check out my Patreon page, I will leave a link in the description box for that as well. And I hope you have a great day.